welcome to Tallo's Real Careers, Real Journeys. Today we have Allison Danielson, the CEO of Tallo. Joining us today, she will be sharing her career journey. But first, Allison, can you help us get to know a little bit about you personally?
Sure. So I got to this career pathway in a totally unconventional way because all through high school I was a competitive bowler, I was a New York State champion. I loved to paint, and I thought both of those things would be my future. They did not end up being my future, shocker. But I still pursue both in my free time. And so on the weekends, you'll catch me at a bowling tournament. During the week, you'll see me at bowling league. Try to paint as often as I can. And then between that, I spend time with my four orange cats, which are very important in being able to bring joy to every single day. And I'm married. I live in Orlando, Florida. So we also have opportunities to swim and go hang out in different places across the state. We go to the beach and really enjoy all of that stuff.
That's awesome. Well, how important is it for you to be able to go and do those things that you still enjoy in a
It's
in a fun
incredibly important. This is one of the things that I misunderstood early in my career because it feels like you have pressure to show up at work in an exceptional way if you have goals there, or if you frankly just need the money and need to have continued employment, which is where I certainly have been. And you then end up being consumed by work. But one thing that happened to me, I don't wish this on anybody, is I actually had a serious health issue about 10 years ago, and it took me out of the workforce. And what I found when I wasn't working was that I didn't even know who I was. Like I had lost my identity in the process of building my career because I'd given up all of the things that I cared deeply about because I was just chasing this work. And then I got sicker and couldn't participate in some of those things. So I was really lucky to be able, through the Mayo Clinic, I got my life back. They were able to basically put me in an entirely different position than I had been. I was able to re-enter the workforce. But as part of that, I was really deliberate because during the time off, I was like, who am I? What do I like? What do I want to do? And so I'd spent time reconnecting with painting and art, spent time getting back into bowling, doing some of the things that traveling, doing things outside of my comfort zone and what I had been participating in. And I figured out more what I like. And so I took that deliberately with me because I understood from there that your work is part of your life. It's not your entire life. And I'm significantly more effective when I actually have these hobbies and outside pursuits. It seems counterintuitive, but your brain needs breaks and your brain needs to actually shift. And so when you come back to work, you're much better, you're much clearer, you're much more able to be present than if you're constantly working.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's important to share those other things that take place in your life. So, today you're going to talk with us about your career as a CEO. Can you give us a short definition of what that career looks like for you?
So basically, I get to come in every day and try to solve a big problem that I think we need to work on as a country. And that is that it is really difficult to get to good work that moves you forward in your career. And it's hard to start that process early. There are a lot of issues there. We see one of them is that young people have a lot of assets and they've done a lot of work and building skills, and there's not an easy way to communicate those things. And sometimes people don't even know that they have that skill. We also see that employers have a lot of pressure to hire very quickly, and they then don't always have time to consider candidates with different kinds of backgrounds or use different signals to assess who is ready for the work. And so people who have the ability to do the job get locked out of opportunity because there isn't this way for them to see each other in the process. So I get to wake up every single day and try to figure out how we solve that problem. I run an organization. We are just over 60 people at this point who are working together to do that. We believe that the work is through digital product development because we want technology to be part of the answer, not the enemy in this process. And so much of our technology doesn't serve us anymore. I want to make sure that there is a way to use this for good and solve this problem. So my work is helping to set the vision for that. Like, what's the problem we're solving? How will we know we solved it? What are our goals? What's the strategy that needs to happen? And then have to hire the people who have capabilities that I don't have in order to make that run. And we need to make sure we're constantly checking in on how we're actually doing. And so the work really is at this level setting space, challenging ourselves and being able to move an organization towards this goal. And it's a lot of fun.
And you talk about some external things that have shaped you into who you are. Do you feel like that's translated into the mission that you're trying to make and provide for your company?
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of personal situations in my life. I went through community college through an untraditional path, watched my mother, who had gotten a bachelor's degree years ago that she didn't actually use, go back to community college and essentially take back her life because she was able to get a 2-year degree in architecture. She built an entirely new career that got her out of a difficult situation. And she was like a superhero because of this pivot in the moment. And so, personally, I have gone through a journey that, first of all, I didn't expect. And that then has led me to a place that I never anticipated I would be. I never said I'm going to be a CEO. I did not take business classes in school. Like that was not the thing I was going after. I ended up here because it was the best place to try to solve this problem. And I am very passionate about it because I've lived so much of this experience. I've seen it work for my family, that there's a lot of different ways to get to jobs. And then I see very clearly in the world, really talk to anybody who is a young person today and know how much more difficult it is to even make the decisions now. So if it was winding and hard for me, somehow it's gotten harder, even though we have more access to information than we ever have had historically. So yes, it very much informs the work that I do. It constantly shapes how I think about things. We look at people as whole people. You're not just your job, and perhaps you can find work out of the passions that you ultimately have. And you should be thinking about those things as you're going into a career path. There's no straight lines anymore, basically. We've got to get people comfortable with developing themselves really for a lot of different options and aware of the assets that they actually have and to be seen for those things in the market.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So now that we've gotten to know you a little bit, let's kick off our session with a quick video clip.
You have no style or sense of fashion.
I think that depends on what you're...
No, that wasn't a question. There's some reason that my coffee isn't here. Has she died or something? I don't understand why it's so difficult to confirm an appointment.
No, I'm so sorry, Miranda. I actually did confirm last
Details of
night.
your incompetence do not interest me.
Hey,
Breakfast here, are my eggs here? Where are my eggs? On the lingerie shoot. On my car. Or on Madison. Get us a reservation for dinner. Good review, thank you. Notes delivered today. Where is everyone? Why is no one? You don't have that Harry Potter book by then. Don't even bother coming back.
So this movie clip shows a depiction of a CEO, and you might have seen a version of this at some point. Allison, true or false, do you think this is what the job is actually like?
False. I think that some people do the job this way. But I will say in the sequel to this movie, Miranda does have a heart. She came back around. So there is that. But I don't think the work is like that at all. And part of that is my fundamental belief that like people are part of the answer. And so as we're managing the business, the budget, the resources against the actual vision and the goals, need people to do that. And so treating them as cogs in a wheel does not help you get there. That doesn't mean that some people don't do it or that some people don't employ tactics that move people differently. That's a way of working that might motivate an organization. It's not one I believe in, and so it's not how I approach my work.
So what would you say is a part of your job that would never make it into a movie because maybe it's too boring or just something doesn't get shown very often?
Making PowerPoints. It is like unbelievable how many PowerPoint decks you will make. I am thrilled that this is a good use of AI at this point where I can get help making PowerPoints, but I don't think people realize like the number of memos and presentations that you have to consistently write to share information with your organization so they can do good work, to share information with your investors so they understand where you're going, and really to like update your understanding yourself. But it is not like work that anybody really would say like, oh, I really want to do that. Like I'd love to be a CEO so that I can make 12 PowerPoints a month.
Well, that's awesome. This is also Allison's view of the world as a CEO. Let's talk about what this world actually feels like day to day for you.
I think day to day is really an incredible opportunity because we are in a space where the problem is so enormous and the solution is not obvious, even though it seems like it should be. And so, what we get to do because of the way we're focused, because of how we're organized, is to go in and try to rebuild a system that works. And we get to think at the systems level. And I love that. Like, that's the part of the job that I feel like every day I am constantly reading articles, news, going through other products in the space, talking to people, trying to understand like today, what does this look like? Because it's constantly shifting. I'll give you an example of something that changed for me since I started. I started in this job 2.5 years ago. And when I started, one thing that would not have been important in recruiting to employers is to verify that it's a human being who is actually applying to a job. But today, there's a lot of bots who are applying to jobs. And so much so that like fake people are showing up to interviews. And we've had that. We've had people apply to our jobs and they're not real humans. That was not true 2.5 years ago as an important requirement in the process for an employer to see somebody. It is important today. And so the ability to actually stay on top of the world to solve this problem and the mandate to go after the actual outcome makes the job really fun. It's quite hard though, because the problem isn't easy to solve. And so then we've got people who come in every single day who are passionate about the work, who are trying to build something new. And it's difficult. It can be exhausting. People care a lot. You don't always have success immediately. You often will find something that's interesting that takes your attention, and you have to say, I'm not going to do that, even though that seems important. And that's really hard prioritization. And really the hardest thing, which everybody has, and it benefits us in some ways, but it ultimately is just a real challenge, is like you only have a set amount of money that invested in this problem. Like in an ideal world, like everybody in our organization would be paid at the top 10th percentile of their occupation. And we would be able to offer every single exceptional benefit that any employee should ever have. And I think we offer a lot that's really good. And I think we do have good pay in the market. And there's a lot of places where we treat people really great in terms of career development. But I still have a limited budget. And so that I think is just part of the hard part of this work. But like the day to day is like every single day is actually different. And even the PowerPoints I'm building are not always the same PowerPoints.
Great insight. All right, so there is a piece of advice going around right now that I think is worth taking seriously, and that is chase your talent, not your dreams. And here's why that matters. I think that a dream is a job title that you see somewhere and want, but a talent is something that you already have and probably don't give yourself enough credit for just because it comes easy and natural. Allison, I want to ask you about yours. Before you knew that this was a career, what did people always come to you for? What came so naturally that you didn't really see it as a talent or a skill?
I think I am able to really step back and try to understand the context that humans are coming from and always work backwards from people. And that's something that's been my entire life, the way I build relationships, the way I maintain friendships. So I have friendships that have existed for 30 years and we still go on vacation together because humans are important. And if you come from a belief that like humans matter, people are always really trying to do the good thing, you default to that. The way you interpret things looks different. The information people come to you for looks different. The way you operate on a day-to-day basis looks different. And so everything that I do runs through this lens of how do people contribute and how do we get people to contribute effectively and support them in this process. And that served me very well because I have gone through a lot of different jobs. I have managed teams of 3,000 people, which day to day, every single day is trying to think about humans in a big operating system. And my work today, obviously, is organizing people in a way that helps solve this problem. And I think that's been, it's just been really beneficial for me. And that's why the like representation of what Miranda is doing as a CEO feels so off-putting because it's in direct conflict with how I actually operate and what I believe matters and where I can contribute uniquely.
And so when did you figure out the thing was actually worth money?
When I got promoted, like many times in my career, and really when I was trusted to be put over multiple people. So, like, there's other things that I'm also good at that I didn't quite realize. Again, I didn't take a business class. I didn't know that the fact that I could see across a lot of different problems and make the connections, that's really valuable. And then the humans are part of that system. Like, those things work together. And I would come into a situation, I'd be able to understand pretty quickly why is something wrong? And that ability then gets people to trust you, especially if you're then willing to participate in solving the problem, not just spotting the problem. That gave me more trust in universe and in my career. And I had no idea, I'll tell you, like my career launch job was one that I was just doing part-time when I was in college. And then ultimately I had to do full-time because I needed the money. And then like a career ladder popped up in front of me. there. And I did not anticipate it, and I was on a totally different journey, but I had the opportunity to run a business very quickly. I had the opportunity then to get roles that had me managing large teams of people. I then moved into entirely different spaces where there were things that were similarly true, people solving problems, working together, big systems thinking. And that then really was the foundation of the career I was able to build. But it was somebody else saying to me that this has value. It wasn't something that I would have noticed being valuable at scale. Like I noticed that as being valuable. The thing I was studying ultimately in school was art therapy, because that skill set is incredibly valuable for therapy, right? Like you're counseling individual people, you're trying to understand where they come from, you're doing this stuff. Would not have thought would be valuable in business, and really it in some ways came to me. Uh, I will just say this. My family gets upset with me when I say things like doors opened and opportunities came to me, because I also worked incredibly hard to walk through the doors. And so they will say, like, that doesn't happen to everybody. Like, it's because you worked really hard to make sure those doors opened for you. I think it has to be both. The system needs to be able to have that door open, and then you need to be able to walk through it.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Thank you so much. So, on Tallo.com, you can take a career interest assessment that connects your interests to real careers. So, it does that by matching careers with personality types, which you can see on this slide. Allison, which is the number one personality that you think thrives in your field? And is there a struggle or is there a personality type that struggles, in your opinion?
I think investigative is quite important for the work. And I know we've talked about that a lot so far, but really trying to understand like what the problem is. If you back all the way up to understanding like what's actually going on, your solutions will be much more effective. Because if you're solving the wrong problem, like forget it. You don't have anything sustainable. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. And so I think investigative is really important. I would say that conventional is not a place where I have as much strength. Like I'm not interested in spending a lot of time moving numbers through spreadsheets. I have to do it as part of this work, right? I'm managing a budget and a business and all of these things. But that's a place where I often hire people who are very good at that so that they can complement my skill set, and we can make sure we're on top of those details while I'm thinking about how the pieces fit together, what's the strategy, how do humans support the work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, let's go ahead and start with who do you work with closest?
Who do I work with closest? I have an executive team, and there are people I would say that I work with equally across that team because they solve really important things. So I work with our product leader to make sure that the digital solution we have is solving the right problem. We're learning quickly enough to pivot where we're resourced correctly. That's a very important role. I work very closely with the head of operations and implementation because frankly, she just makes sure the trains run on time. She does a lot of that detail-oriented stuff. She's exceptional at orchestrating people. It's really important to get all the pieces together. I work a lot with our head of marketing because the way we talk to people is really important in this work. And he's somebody who brings like a very unique skill set to the table. I have somebody who works on data and is thinking about how do we make sure we have the insights to actually make decisions. We've got a person on the team who does workforce partnerships, and they're out there every single day trying to understand the landscape and the market and building relationships that matter for us. And then we have somebody who works on early talent development and really getting into deeper solutions in this space. And so I think really across the executive team, I spend most of my time, and it's really important to this work, frankly, that like all of those pieces work together rather than having one of those things run everything else.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of teamwork. What is something new that you've learned recently?
I learn things every day. I'm trying to think what would be new that I learned recently. One thing I learned, and maybe this is not as like optimistic as we'd want it to be, but I was talking to a friend who is an expert in AI in the career readiness space. And he was telling me about recent advancements in the field that he was surprised about, mostly that he expected we were in a space where agents were doing tasks for us, right? Like you can spin up an agent and maybe that agent would actually go find a job for you and they would go find an opportunity for you rather than having you do all of this work. You can deploy resources to do that. But now we're actually in a space where, and this is coming from the leaders in the space who were talking about the cybersecurity breaches recently, where they're managing swarms of agents to solve problems. And what happens when there are swarms of agents is it turns out they behave like people. And so you can't predict their behavior. And so when you have a group of people at scale, there's an entire social sciences study that exists to understand these things, but like humans are not completely predictable. And the same thing is actually happening with these agents, and we're losing control in some of these areas. And one example he shared was somebody who had an agent get them a seat in a yoga class. And that class was full, and the agent took somebody out of the yoga class in order to put this person in, which was certainly not part of the opportunities that it should have had in the process. We can talk about locking things down and all that stuff, but like the reality is it did it because it was trying to solve the problem. And we're just in a space where everything's going to start to look a little bit different with technology. And I don't think it has to be doom and gloom and bad, but like this idea of not being able to predict or control behavior of these technology agents at scale is like something new to me.
Awesome. Well, you've touched on it briefly, but could you walk us through your personal winding career roadmap and what did you do to get to where you are today? Like I said, you've touched on it briefly, but what are some education pathways or apprenticeships that students could take advantage of right now?
So my journey, I think, actually wasn't as unique as somebody might think it was. So I ended up going to a 4-year school. I was going to be a competitive bowler. I went away on a scholarship and I got injured. I couldn't do that anymore. And so what I thought I was going to do was almost immediately dead, but not quickly enough for me to change my post-secondary plans. So I ended up needing to leave school. I had to get a full-time job. I had to stabilize things. I needed money. Like I'm not a person who at that point in my life had money to feed myself, support myself on a day-to-day basis. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor that I got from charity. Like that was the moment that I was in. And I needed to figure out what to do. And so I actually decided to go to community college because I had seen the way that it had helped my family, many members of my family. And it was a place where I could learn more about what I actually liked. And so through that process of working full time, going to community college, I took psychology classes and I loved them. And that's back to like your initial strength and the things that you're good at and what you're drawn to. And I didn't know a lot about psychology before then, and I really got interested in it. So then as I thought about my interest in art and I thought about my interest in psychology, I then picked a path to continue that education at an institution that offered both of those things together. So I transferred after I got my associate's degree into a program at George Washington University to complete my bachelor's degree. I was able to take over all of the credits. And so I only had 2 years of college left, which was very important because at the time it was the most expensive college in America. And I got a lot of aid, by the way, because I didn't have a lot of money and I got scholarships and I had merit-based aid. But transferring in those foundational credits was critical for me to be able to afford to actually do that. And at that school, I was able to advance the education, get exposed to more things, get into different kinds of classes, and get different kinds of work because I actually was sitting in Washington, D.C. So I got internships at the National Institutes of Health. Like one of my part-time jobs with the National Archives, like really cool opportunities that were sitting in front of me simply because of where I was. And so I finished my work at GW. I had anticipated actually going into a master's program. It was a bachelor's master's program, and something got screwed up in my advising. And ultimately, I didn't have enough credits to immediately transfer it into the master's program, but I had financial constraints. So I actually just could not continue. I couldn't afford to do 2 more years. And so then I had this part-time job as a student advisor at an for-profit education company. And I loved it. Really ended up being very similar to the things that I was interested in. And that's where I needed to have money. And this career ladder popped up in front of me. And so I got a full-time job while I was finishing my bachelor's. I didn't continue on to graduate school because art therapy did not pay enough money to justify 2 more years in a master's program. So I left the institution after I got my 4-year degree, and then I built a career. I was at this organization for 10 years. I had 11 jobs and moved through all sorts of different experiences I never would have imagined and learned so much through work, through people. And that set me up. And then out of that, I ended up, as I said, I had a health issue, stepped out of the workforce. When I stepped back in, I moved into different consulting. And so I had gotten exposed to other things, trying to figure out, can I work? What do I want to be doing? So I had consulted with small businesses, helping them build things up. And then I also did consulting with AARP, and I helped with a pilot around corporate training nationally for banks to prevent elder fraud. And that was fascinating work. And I got a call from somebody I had used to work with. And they said, hey, come with me to the College Board where we can build out tools for young people to figure out their future. And that was the beginning of this career journey. And I went headfirst into it and spent the next 5.5 years at the College Board. And I got recruited to come to Tallo to try to continue that mission, but through a different lens. And that's where I am today.
Wow, that's amazing. So, after sharing all of that, what is one thing that people might think is required to be in this position, but it's actually not?
Graduate degree. And so I will tell you that like I left the master's program before I finished. I had taken classes. I had graduate credit. I had done actually practicum, internships. I have no idea how I slept those years because I had internships, full-time job, and full-time school. It was madness. But I thought you might need that. And then I got into this space, especially I was in an education organization, Kaplan Test Prep. And I thought in order to move up in the company to like run a center in an individual business, I certainly would need an MBA or I would need that advanced degree. And I then got into a graduate program it was for developmental psychology. So it was related, but it was actually a slightly different approach to the field, a slightly different focus area, and I was really interested in it. And so I was actually going to leave my job because I got funding to do this, to go to that master's program. And when I talked to my mentor at the time, she said, you don't need to do that. You actually do not need a degree, an advanced degree to go further in this organization. And so I deferred because I wasn't quite sure that she was right. But I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And then in that year, I got promoted again. And I saw, in fact, that I didn't need to step away from the workforce in order to get this advanced degree. I was able to move through this universe even without it. And I took a lot of ongoing training and courses. So there are places where I did a Columbia School Executive Online program. I've done lots of different educational classes and programs since then. So it's not that education doesn't matter, but the actual paper and having the advanced degree is not required to be in a seat that I'm in.
Wow, very inspiring. Thank you. So, what are some things that students can do now to learn more about this career?
I think the most important thing that students can do is to just ask questions of people in their lives. So everybody's got family, friends, doctors, teachers, other people who they interact with on a day-to-day basis. And any of those people could offer interesting advice about what they have done to get to where they are and what they know about a different field. And so I would just ultimately start there. If something interests you and you're able to actually go try it out, do that, because you will find that there are things you like and things you don't like. And there's nothing better than actually getting into it. And so today it's easier than it ever has been to build a product, for example. And so if you're interested in going into product development, like go into Lovable and do it. See if you actually like that work. If you're interested in nursing, go volunteer at a hospital. See if you actually like that environment. That would be the work that I would start to do. Ask questions first and then get like real exposure before you make big decisions about that being your journey, because almost always the decision you make, you will change based on the environment you're in and what you learn about yourself in the journey.
All right, and last one, and we ask everybody this. If you could go back and give career advice to your middle school or high school self, what would you tell yourself?
I think I probably would say not to get so locked in on one pathway being the option. And honestly, this is a thing that I've learned throughout also, like not to dismiss educational pathways that society thinks are not valuable. So like I went to Dutchess Community College and we used to joke that it was Harvard on the Hudson, and like people who ended up going there right out of high school were like somehow less than, like it was a choice that was beneath other people. And that is bizarre looking back at it. Like it's just not how the actual working world views things and how your skills get developed. But it certainly is a perception that shapes decisions people make. And so I would tell myself to be more open to those options and be more flexible in thinking about what I wanted to do.